In the last episode, we discussed the aftermath of Jinju and Hideyoshi's demands. We now brave the realm of politics. I'm Stefan, and this is Japan at War. I want to give you a disclaimer before we begin. This next subject is very complex, and on top of that, very few sources are consistent, and even fewer than that are reliable. Anyways, please show your support for this video by liking the video. Alright, let's begin. Late year 1593, something called the Ungchon Negotiation between Konishi Yukinaga as the lead Japanese representative and acting Ming representative Shen Weijing started. Konishi was focused on two main demands: a diplomatic marriage between the Ming dynasty and Japan, and all territory south of the Han in Korea. In previous negotiations, Konishi had stressed trade between the two nations. And it doesn't seem like it was much of a priority anymore, as, well, from what I can tell, it wasn't discussed further. During the negotiations, Shen Weijing offered to cede 3.5 Korean provinces to Japan. Though, if we're being honest, this was almost certainly a delaying tactic. Shen also agreed to send a Ming princess to marry a Japanese prince. The Japanese side threatened that if this was all a lie, that they would actually raise more soldiers and launch a new invasion into China from the Chola province, and would invite the Nanban to invade Zhejiang from the south, which would force the Ming into a two-front war. By the way, the Nanban they're referring to almost certainly refers to the Spaniards, which, if any of you watched my live stream, then you'll know that Spain had been thinking of invading the Ming at some point. Let me know in the comments section if this is a topic you would like me to explore in a future live stream. Song Yang-chang, Supreme Commander Li Rusong's superior, who was hosting the negotiations, also agreed to give the Korean territory to Japan. He also instructed Shen to agree to the diplomatic marriage proposal. Now, it should be noted that Shen Weijing wouldn't have agreed to any of this without his approval, and Song was actually using him as the fall guy in case the whole thing got out. Song's plan was to find a Chinese peasant girl, dress her up as a Ming princess, and then marry her off to make Hideyoshi happy. In return, the Japanese would withdraw its forces from Korea. So what about the Ming court in Beijing? Well, for the most part, his plan was for them to not know about the marriage at all. When he sent dispatches to them, he emphasized Japan being a part of a tributary trade relations and kept most of the rest out. The Koreans found out about these secret deals, though, from a captured Japanese soldier who knew about the details of the negotiations. Also, I have no idea how this man was captured, or how he knew, but he did. The whole thing was exposed on the Ming side as well by Zhu Longguang, who was a private teacher of Supreme Commander Li Rusong. The very idea of a Ming princess marrying into any of the Japanese nobility shook the Ming court to its core, especially because both Song Yang-chang and Li Rusong were said to be a part of this plan. In fact, according to the Great Ming Military Blog, only through very smart political maneuvering of the anti-war faction were they able to downplay the scandal, though Zhu Longguang was put to death for being a whistleblower. Of course, this made it impossible for Shen Weijing to continue with the plan to marry off a princess, even if the girl wasn't really going to be a princess. Instead, they claimed to the Japanese that the princess had died while traveling to them. Now, in the beginning of 1594, Kato Kiyomasa decided that he himself would engage in political talks with the Ming. He felt that Konishi he was actually being dishonest, and he was twisting the words of Hideyoshi. He met a few times with the Korean warrior monk commander Yu Zhong and the Korean officer Yi Kyung-soo, who were following the orders of the Ming Sichuan general Liu Ding in So-Seng-po. Kato would stress Hideyoshi's original demands, which confused and enraged the Koreans present. Now, I'm not sure about any further details of these meetings, but they obviously didn't accomplish anything. Well, other than confusing everybody involved. It actually seems that of all the demands that Hideyoshi had, the hand of a Ming princess was the most important to him. Now, my personal theory is that since he started off as a peasant and had made up his family history, this would have been an incredible amount of validation, not just for him, but for Clan Toyotomi as well. According to a report sent back from Ming intelligence agents sent by Zhu Fuyon, the governor of Fujian, Hideyoshi was building even more warships and preparing to invade again when he heard the news that the marriage deal had failed. Hideyoshi kept pressing the issue for a Ming princess and repeatedly threatened another invasion. It was actually only until June 1st, 1594, after further negotiations between Shen Weijing and Konishi Yukinaga, and Konishi personally reporting back to Hideyoshi, that Hideyoshi let it go and lowered his demands to 3 things. The Joseon court should hand over 1 prince and 2 ministers to serve Japan. 4 Korean provinces should be given to that prince, which of course means that there would be a puppet government formed from that. Tributary trade between China and Japan should then resume. Now, if we move on towards the year 1596, Konishi Yukinaga and Kato Kiyomasa were still trying to negotiate with the Koreans in an effort to stop further war. With Hideyoshi's permission, they kept demanding for Korea to send a prince so that a second invasion could be called off. The demand for tributary relations with China doesn't seem to have been brought up anymore. This, of course, failed. Even then, Konishi Yukinaga sent Yanagawa Shigenobu to tell Hideyoshi that the Koreans refused to send a prince, but would send 2 ministers in his place, and would send yearly tribute. Hideyoshi agreed and called off the invasion. This was all a lie by Konishi Yukinaga, though. The Koreans never agreed to any of this, and when Ming envoys from the government went to Japan to give the title of King of Japan to Hideyoshi, but not any of the other demands, he found out then about Konishi's lies and flew into a rage. Shen Weijing was actually demanding at this time that Hideyoshi pull all of his men out of Korea and destroy all the Japanese castles that had been made there. Hideyoshi was pissed. It felt humiliating to him. Now, he used this and the failed negotiations with the Koreans as just some of the reasons to declare a second invasion. During this time period, Yi Sun-sin was also busy. In 1593, he had his men reverse engineer the Japanese matchlocks, and he had what he believed to be their equal. He sent 5 of these to Seoul, where the king had finally settled back in. Won Kyun was also busy, as he constantly sent back reports back to Seoul, listing the many ways that Yi was ineffective as a commander. One of those ways was that he wouldn't attack the Japanese, something that Won had been trying to get him to do all the way into 1594. This was a trap though, and Yi knew it. Not only would he be unable to truly hurt the Japanese at this time, but there was also the chance that it would hurt his own fleet, as the Japanese now secured their ships close to the shoreline with defensive emplacements overlooking them. It was all a ploy to try and trick him into proving Won's words right. That's not to say that Yi Sun-sin didn't launch his ships though. On April 23rd and 24th, Yi launched an attack on around 30 Japanese vessels just north of Kojai Island. There wasn't much fighting as the vessels had been abandoned by the shoreline where they were then burned. The Japanese sailors got away. Yi Sun-sin also contracted typhoid, and while he survived, by June around 1,700 of his men had died. Around November, Kwan Yeol sent a letter to Yi Sun-sin commanding him to attack the Japanese at Changmongpo. He sent back that he would need Kwan Yeol's army there to fight them on land should they refuse to get into their ships. Kwan Yeol wouldn't comply. He did try and launch an attack still, but nothing came of it. The Japanese refused to fight. Instead, they actually held up a sign that said, "We're already in peace negotiations with the Ming. we don't need to fight you. He, of course, withdrew. The Joseon government was now investigating the relationship between Yi Sun-sin and Won Kyun. They decided that since no one could replace Yi, he would keep his position, for now, while Won Kyun was reassigned to be Chola Province army commander, so he could observe the enemy. And this is where I will leave you. Confusion, lies, and Hideyoshi committing to another invasion. I'll see you next time.